Alexander Hartwell was finishing the most important business call of his career when he saw them. The snow was falling heavily on Christmas Eve, coating the park bench where a small boy sat holding what appeared to be a bundle of blankets. Alexander was walking from his last meeting of the year back to his penthouse, his mind on profit margins and expansion plans. D5. Alexander had built Hartwell Capital into one of the most successful investment firms in the country, worth billions. He had everything he'd worked for, everything he thought mattered. He was so focused on his phone, on the deal he'd just closed, that he almost walked right past them. Almost. But something made him look up, made him see the boy. He couldn't have been more than 6 or 7 years old, wearing a thin jacket that was too small, no gloves, no hat. His face was red from the cold, his lips tinged with blue, and he was holding a baby, wrapped in what looked like adult clothing and a thin blanket, protecting her from the snow with his own small body. Alexander stopped walking. Something about the scene was wrong, desperately wrong. Where were this child's parents? Why was he alone in the snow on Christmas Eve, holding an infant? He approached slowly, not wanting to frighten the boy. "Hey there, are you okay? Where are your parents?" The boy looked up at him with eyes that were far too old for his young face, filled with fear and desperate hope. "Sir, please, my baby sister is freezing. We've been here a long time and she won't stop crying, and I don't know what to do." Alexander knelt down and his heart clenched at what he saw. The baby in the boy's arms couldn't have been more than a few months old, and she was, indeed, crying weakly, her little face pale and cold. The boy was shivering violently, but he kept the baby pressed against his chest, trying to keep her warm with his own body heat. "What's your name?" Alexander asked gently. "Tommy," the boy said. "This is my sister Maya. She's 4 months old. Sir, please, can you help us? I tried to keep her warm, but I think she's really cold now." "Where are your parents, Tommy?" Tears welled up in the boy's eyes. "Mommy left us here. She said she had to go get something and she'd be right back. But that was before the sun went down, and she hasn't come back. I waited and waited like she said, but Maya is so cold, and I'm scared." Alexander felt rage and horror wash over him. What kind of mother abandoned children in winter weather? But he pushed those thoughts aside. Right now, these children needed immediate help. "Tommy, I'm going to help you, okay? But first, let me warm you both up." Alexander immediately took off his expensive wool coat and wrapped it around both children, pulling them close to share his body heat. The baby's crying intensified briefly before weakening again, which worried Alexander even more. He called 911, explaining the situation while keeping the children wrapped in his coat. 2 children exposed to cold for an unknown period of time. The infant is showing signs of hypothermia, weak, cry, pale, possibly lethargic. "We need an ambulance immediately." Tommy looked up at him with terrified eyes. "Are they going to take us away?" "I don't want to leave Maya. I promised Mommy I'd keep her safe." "Nobody's going to separate you," Alexander promised, though he had no idea if he could keep that promise. "Right now, we just need to make sure you're both healthy, okay?" While they waited for the ambulance, Alexander held both children, using his body to shield them from the wind and snow. He called his assistant, despite the late hour. "Marcus, I need you to do something for me. There are 2 children at the emergency room at City General. A boy, maybe 6 or 7, named Tommy, and an infant girl, Maya. They're being abandoned by their mother. I want you to make sure they have everything they need and find out what's going to happen to them." The ambulance arrived within 8 minutes. The paramedics immediately assessed both children, wrapping them in warming blankets and starting oxygen for the baby. "You've probably saved their lives," one paramedic told Alexander. "Another hour out here and we'd be looking at serious frostbite, possibly worse for the infant." "I'm coming with you," Alexander said. It wasn't a question. At the hospital, Tommy refused to let go of Alexander's hand while doctors examined Maya. The baby was severely hypothermic and dehydrated, but thanks to Tommy's efforts to protect her and Alexander's quick response, there was no permanent damage. "You did really well taking care of your sister," a nurse told Tommy as they warmed him slowly, careful not to warm him too fast. "You're very brave. I had to keep her safe," Tommy said simply. "That's what big brothers do." Alexander stayed at the hospital through the night, making calls, pulling strings, demanding answers. The story that emerged was heartbreaking. The children's mother was a drug addict who'd been living in a shelter with them. She'd left that evening, saying she needed to get something, and had never returned. An investigation was launched, but it was Christmas Eve, and everything moved slowly. "What's going to happen to them?" Alexander asked the social worker. "They'll go into foster care," she explained. "We'll try to keep them together, but it's difficult to place siblings, especially with an infant. We might have to separate them temporarily." "Oh," Alexander said firmly. "That's not acceptable. Tommy has been taking care of his sister. He's terrified of being separated from her. You're not going to traumatize these children further, Mr. Hartwell. I understand your concern, but we have protocols." "Then change the protocols," Alexander interrupted. "I want to be their emergency foster placement. I'll take them both, keep them together, while you figure out a permanent solution." The social worker looked skeptical. "Mr. Hartwell, foster care isn't that simple. There are background checks, home studies, training requirements, and frankly, you don't seem like the typical foster parent profile. I'm a billionaire with unlimited resources, a spotless record, and a penthouse that's more than large enough for 2 children, Alexander said. "And I'm the person who found them freezing to death in the snow on Christmas. Tell me what I need to do to keep these children together and safe, and I'll do it." It took Alexander's lawyers working through the night, his considerable influence, and the fact that it was Christmas Eve with limited options. But by morning, he'd been approved as an emergency foster placement. The children were released into his care with the condition that a social worker would do home visits and assessments. Alexander, who 24 hours earlier had been focused entirely on business, found himself carrying a sleeping infant while holding the hand of a traumatized 6-year-old, walking into his penthouse that had never housed children before. "Oh," Tommy breathed, looking around at the floor-to-ceiling windows, the expensive furniture, the space that was bigger than anywhere he'd ever lived. "Is this real?" "It's real," Alexander confirmed, "and it's going to be your home for as long as you and Maya need it." The first few days were chaos. Alexander hired a nanny, but found himself not wanting to hand the children off to someone else. He took a week off work, the first real vacation he'd taken in years, and focused on getting Tommy and Maya settled. Tommy was wary at first, clearly waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Alexander to change his mind and send them away. But gradually, as Alexander showed up consistently, kept his promises, treated them with patience and care, the boy began to open up. "Why are you being so nice to us?" Tommy asked one evening as Alexander helped him pick out pajamas from the clothes they'd bought. "Because you deserve kindness," Alexander said simply. "Because every child deserves to be safe and warm and cared for. And because, Tommy, you're an incredibly brave kid who took care of his baby sister when your mom couldn't. That matters." "Are you going to keep us?" Tommy asked, his voice small and hopeful. Alexander knelt down to the boy's level. "Tommy, I can't make promises about the future because there are social workers and courts involved. But I can promise you this. I will fight as hard as I can to keep you and Maya together. To make sure you're safe. To give you the childhood you deserve. You're not going back to that park bench. Not ever." Over the next few months, as the legal process ground forward, Alexander's life transformed in ways he never anticipated. He learned to change diapers and make bottles, to read bedtime stories and check for monsters under the bed. He attended Tommy's school performances and took Maya to pediatrician appointments. his penthouse filled with toys and children's laughter. His business partners were baffled by the changes. "You're turning down meetings for parent-teacher conferences?" His cool asked incredulously. "Alexander, you've never prioritized anything over work before." "I was wrong about what mattered," Alexander said simply. "These children need me. The business will survive without me in every single meeting. Tommy and Maya won't survive without consistency and care." The investigation into the children's mother revealed that she'd overdosed that same Christmas Eve, dying in an alley while her children waited for her in the snow. There were no other relatives willing or able to take the children. The path to adoption became clear, if unusual. "Mr. Hartwell, I have to be honest," the social worker said during one of her visits. "When you first said you wanted to take these children, I was skeptical. Single men, especially wealthy businessmen, don't typically become foster parents. I thought you might be acting on impulse, that the reality would be too difficult. And now?" Alexander asked, bouncing Maya on his knee while Tommy did homework at the dining table. "Now I see a man who's completely devoted to these children, who's transformed his entire life to put their needs first, who's become exactly the father they needed." She smiled. "I'm recommending the adoption move forward. Mr. Hartwell, these children belong with you." When the adoption was finalized, 6 months after that Christmas Eve, Alexander held both children close and made them a promise. "I found you in the snow when you needed help, but the truth is, you saved me. I was so focused on money and success that I'd forgotten what life was actually for. You reminded me. You gave me purpose beyond profit, love beyond business deals. Thank you for letting me be your dad." Tommy, now 7, and much more confident than the scared child from the park bench, said seriously, "You wrapped us in your coat when we were freezing. You took us home when we had nowhere to go. That's what real dads do. They keep you warm and safe, and they don't leave." Years later, when Tommy was in high school and Maya was in elementary school, they'd sometimes talk about that Christmas Eve that changed everything. "I thought we were going to die," Tommy would admit. "I was so cold, and Maya was crying, and I didn't know what to do. Then Dad stopped and saw us when everyone else just walked past." "Why did he stop?" Maya would ask. "Why did he help us?" "Because he's the kind of person who sees people who need help and actually helps them," Tommy would say. "Not everyone is like that, but Dad is. He always has been," Alexander would add. "I stopped because something told me to look up from my phone, to pay attention to the world around me, and I saw 2 children who needed help. It was the easiest decision I've ever made, even though it changed my entire life. Because all the money I'd made, all the success I'd achieved, it meant nothing compared to having you 2 as my children." At Tommy's high school graduation, he gave a speech about resilience and second chances. "When I was 6 years old, my mother left me and my infant sister on a park bench in the snow on Christmas Eve. We could have died that night, but a man walking past chose to stop, chose to help, chose to open his life to 2 children he didn't know. That choice saved our lives and gave us a future." He looked at Alexander in the audience, holding Maya's hand. "Dad taught me that success isn't about how much money you make or how powerful you become. It's about how you treat people who need help. It's about stopping when everyone else walks past. It's about wrapping freezing children in your coat and taking them home. That's real success. That's real wealth. And I'm grateful every day that he showed me what that looks like." Alexander never regretted the decision he made that Christmas Eve. His business continued to thrive, but it was no longer the center of his life. His children were. The scared little boy who'd protected his sister became a confident young man planning to study social work to help other vulnerable children. The infant who'd nearly frozen to death became a bright, loving girl who filled their home with joy. And sometimes, when it snowed on Christmas Eve, Alexander would take his children to that same park bench, and they'd leave warm coats and blankets, gift cards, and food. Anything that might help the next person who found themselves alone in the cold, we pay it forward. Alexander would tell his children, because we were given a second chance, and other people deserve that too. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe for more tales of compassion, second chances, and families formed through courage and love. Leave a comment about times when someone stopped to help when they could have walked past, or when you made a choice that changed not just someone else's life, but your own. Share your thoughts on how we can all be more aware of those who need help, more willing to sacrifice convenience for compassion, more ready to see crisis as an opportunity to make a real difference. Remember, sometimes the most important decision you'll ever make happens in a moment when you choose to stop and pay attention instead of walking past someone in need. Sometimes wrapping freezing children in your coat and taking them home is exactly what transforms a successful life into a meaningful one.